Jim, isn't it amazing when Michigan can keep this game to a 19-foot, 9-inch game inside that three-point line? It's all there. Nice move by Steve Fisher here. Turn it into the 19.
Hello and welcome to the 19-9 podcast. We are wrapping up our discussion of the Baltimore Boys, or the Boys of Dunbar, the 1980s high school team that is legendary in Baltimore. If you haven't listened to the first two episodes, we talked with the author, Alejandro Danois, about his book and involvement in the documentary, and then broke down a classic Georgetown game from 1984 where two of the players went on and played and won a national championship. This corner of Hardwood History helps tell the story of basketball and basketball culture that we all enjoy today, and it's also an American story and helps explain the difficulties of post-industrial cities and the game that helps some boys escape these difficult circumstances. My guest today is Robert Weyer. Robert, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be back. It's been a while since I've been able to get in.
I know.
This is a really exciting topic for me. Like I was telling you earlier, I feel like I would have never known anything about this team until you brought it up. And after all the research, I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed what I watched and learned about it.
What's great about this book and about this team is that it sheds a spotlight on high school basketball. And I think being from Indiana, that is a natural get for me to find out that there's great high school teams outside of the state of Indiana, because I was so focused on Indiana teams growing up. But this was such a fun team to dive into. We just did the Georgetown podcast too, and they were talking about Morgan Wooten and some of his high school teams. And just, I like digging into that aspect of Hardwood history too.
Yeah, I mean, I like hearing the backstories. It kind of, because we're from Indiana, and when we're growing up, you have your stories with your buddies that you grew up with and you played with, and and this kind of, it's crazy. How this group of this caliber of players could grow up together and play together. And I mean, it just brings it back. Like, even in our sense, it isn't as great of an experience because we weren't as good as these guys, obviously, but it brings back memories of, things that we did that weren't even close to what these guys did. But
well, I think we started the season that we were the best. I think we started the season winning 13 games in a row, and there were 5,000 people at the game where we ended up losing our first game, a home game. And it was an unbelievable game because before the game, during gym class, one of the kids, I won't say his name, but took silicone balls that he had stolen from from somewhere and threw them on the court during gym classes so that it spread out all over the court and ruined the court. And so we played the game, but it was like playing on ice. Like you were sliding all over the place.
This was the kid on your team?
No, he was not.
I was going to say, man.
Just a kid in the school. Yeah, I know. So pretty crazy. But anyways, we 13 games, and it was like the high water mark. They won 59 games in a row. 59-0.
Yeah.
It just shows how exciting it can be to have a win streak like that. And then you think about going 59-0, and you're like, well, that's a little better.
And just not even winning. I mean, they averaged winning by 30 points a game or something.
Traveling all over the country. I mean, looking for someone to beat them, right?
It would be hard to get yourself motivated every single game if you won by that much, right? What do you think?
So, but so let's start out there, because I think that what drove these guys, they had this diversity of different different personalities on the team. But the guy I think that kept them going and just kept them moving forward was Muggsy, right? So he's always got that chip on his shoulder. He doesn't care if he won 200 games in a row, because everybody comes out, and they're like, who's that midget over there? And they're you know what I mean? That's what they were calling him. He is coming out with fire under his butt, because he wants to win every single time. Just to show everybody, and he wants to have 12 steals or do whatever he can to win. That's his thing.
Yeah, he is the driving force of everybody doubting him. But I would even say that with even Muggsy, I think that Wade wouldn't allow them to not come out. I think if they would have came out flat or not doing enough. As far as playing defense, I think their practices probably would have been insane, right? Like the next day,
like they weren't insane already.
I know, that's what I mean. So these guys are probably like, I don't want to make this guy mad because who knows? I might be running for hours with bricks in my hands.
Yeah, we'll talk about the practices from the documentary because I think that's a great part. People can see that in there, and we talked with Ali about it, and they do a great job in the book. The book starts out right there just talking about that year, so they start out with just those first practices, but it was crazy to see that.
It's so, obviously that brings back memories too, like we didn't have bricks.
Yeah.
But, coaches, they were ruthless when I was young. When I would go, it was like we had to do wall sits if we messed up. And we'd be there shaking, our legs would be shaking. They'd be like, grow up.
Yeah.
No, it was a different generation. Or you just run valleys valleys the whole practice because you didn't get a rebound or you didn't box out. And they're like, I'm tired of telling you. You just sit over and run the whole practice. It brought back the hard parts that you had to fight through as a kid mentally. But back then it was just like you had to do it if you wanted to play, right?
Well, I agree, and it's just the ingenuity of the coach, though. He's got this idea in his head that he knows these guys have to be stronger because his players, they don't have some of the advantages that other players have. There's no weight room at his gym or anything like that in the 80s. I don't even know if we had a weight room until maybe my sophomore year. We had some weights, but we didn't really focus on weightlifting.
No, we had a weight room,
but it was more for the football players.
It was
right?
we didn't have a football team. So ours was actually, I would say ours was more for the track team.
Okay.
So it was like a bench.
Right.
And then you had the weight machine that had 4 different things that you could change the thing on where you do leg lifts, or the 4 when you go around you could pull the bar down,
yeah.
Just a basic
basic setup.
And there might have been 2 of those and a bench.
And they don't even have that. So the story in the book goes he's driving around with a manager or someone and he's thinking about how these guys need to get stronger, and they just see this pile of bricks. And he just, finds out if he can takes them. So like you said, they're running with bricks over their head. They've got backpacks and they put bricks in those. They're just doing what they can to make it strong. He's making them run anyways, but he wants them also just to go beyond that. And that definitely, that mentality, it's not good enough to just run or just play. He is going to, improve these guys physically in ways that they couldn't even imagine.
Well, he had a couple things going for him. His experience is playing for those 2 coaches. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that if we were talking to him, I'm sure they took it to the limit too, right?
Yeah.
Because they're legendary coaches back in the day to where they could do whatever they want, right? There was no social media. If you were soft, you just didn't play, right? There wasn't, the players weren't treated like royalty. They were treated like, you're here to do a job, you're going to do it, or we're just not going to play you. But it starts at the lower level, right? So by the time they got there, it didn't matter. They were willing to run through a wall, and that's why they were there, right? So
the book too tells the story, a lot of the backstory of these guys, and I appreciate that so much. Where you see where that toughness came, and overcoming these obstacles came from. You hear about David Wingate taking care of his mom. He was late to school because he's carrying his mom.
Because his mom went for a surgery and came back and she couldn't walk.
So he's carrying her upstairs and doing everything for her. And, I can't imagine, I had so little responsibility sometimes in high school, to be able to focus on sports, to have that on my plate. And then, you see how the mental toughness, and these guys had this togetherness. And I think that's one of the things that I think is really special about high school basketball prior to, the elite guys now jump around a little bit, and I'm sure they're friends, but there's something different, that happens when you grow up with a guy.
Yeah,
right?
You might hate that guy at the beginning, right? It might be, when you're, we'll say, a 4th or 5th grader, you want to be the best player on the team, right? So you got a kid there that you're fighting back and forth because you want to be the guy that shoots. You don't want him to shoot. So at the first, you probably don't like him, or maybe, it's like whenever I went to school, there was multiple schools that all joined together, right?
Yeah.
So you would have at middle school, they all joined together. So you didn't know these guys, and they come in and you would think, you're playing basketball in 4th grade against all your kids, thinking that you were really good, and then these guys come in and they think they're really good because they're playing. And it's almost like you have an arch rivalry within your own school because, and that's it sounds like that's kind of what happened with Muggsy when he first came in because he only wanted to pass the ball to Reggie
Williams.
Yeah, so like Wade had to break him.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say earlier about Wade is, it talks about in the documentary about the one kid that was going to go to Georgetown, and he went to, I can't remember, Idaho State or something of that nature.
Yes.
And then he came back and he ended up dying. Yeah. And that's why he was so hard on his players too, because this documentary really sheds the light on how rough they had it, right? I mean, I can't even fathom. It's like you said, like my responsibilities weren't that big. Like I wanted to, it was funny because like whenever I thought I wanted to work, right? Because I wanted the extra money, and my dad looked at me and said, "You're going to be working the rest of your life.
Right.
You just worry about playing basketball and don't worry. Get your grade. Worry about basketball." And whenever you get done with high school, believe me, you're going to be happy that you didn't spend the last 4 years working, at a restaurant to make a little bit extra money for maybe a pair of shoes that you wanted, or enjoy your high school because afterwards the real world starts, right? Mm. So because we're not going to the NBA. Yeah. I'm a 5'7" white kid that can't jump. So
such a privilege to be able to experience
these guys though. I mean, like Muggsy getting shot when he was 5. I mean, and then he turns into what he turns into. Like, I mean, I guess like they said, like he had begun to dribble and stuff, and he started getting into basketball. But not only did he get shot, right? His dad goes to prison for 12 years. Yeah. I mean, and then you have all this drugs around you. I mean,
guys, right? So one of the things they hit on in the book and in the documentary is the change in Baltimore at this time, where some of the laws that were switched so that younger guys wouldn't get in trouble. So the drug dealers started to try and target these guys because they would go in and their parents could pick them up. So you not only see the downside, right? Where you have maybe a parent that has gotten caught up in it or something they've gone to prison. But you also see this kind of strange allure to it, right? Like your contemporaries are working. They have money. They could buy those shoes that maybe you can't buy or provide for their family, and then they're out the next day. And
it might even be about the shoes,
mentality.
Though. It might be just putting food on the table.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we're talking about shoes, but like they're just trying to eat.
I know.
So I mean, like it would be really hard if you were one of these kids and one of these kingpins came up to you and said, "Hey, listen, you come join my team, and we'll give you, money for your family to eat all week, every week."
Yeah.
I mean, it would be hard if, you see your mom can't afford for everybody to eat. The kids are sharing food just to get by, or you might not eat for a day or two. Yeah. So I said, I can't fathom it because, I didn't have it that way.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine. No. I mean,
no, it's just, but you can see the derivatives of then that toughness, where these guys have this tenacity and this mental toughness to overcome so much. And it's funny, as we widen the circle and talk about John Thompson was in contact with Coach Wade and all these other guys, and you can see because Thompson had that kind of same mentality that Wade did. Is like, I'm not only coaching to win games, but I'm coaching to help these guys
better lives.
On to better lives. I mean, to have players go to Georgetown and get degrees from Georgetown or go to the NBA from there is just such an accomplishment as a coach, and to help the community. Because what did those guys do after they won the national championship? They came back to the community. They're telling guys that, hey, they're in college. Just it changes the mentality. Like, it's not just, hey, I've got to do this one thing. Now there are people that you look up to that are doing something different, that are achieving, realizing achievements in a different way. And it can turn into generational things, right? Where those guys come back to the area later in life and, donate money, all that kind of stuff. It really does change a community. And it seemed to rally this community in particular.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I would say, before I go to this point, I'll go to the one before I was going to make. I think what you were saying is true because they had the kid that died.
Yeah.
So then all the basketball players that are, the ones that maybe aren't as strong-minded as the guys that made it, right, are thinking, well, that's going to be me. Even if I get there, I'm not going to get out, So these guys showed that you can do it. So it was probably a bigger impact because the first kid died, right?
Right.
So these guys made it like, hey, you can do it. You can go to college, and you can get drafted, and you can change your family's lives. And I mean, I forget how many times that Dunbar won after they left, but it was quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh, it was a lot. I mean, he set up a legacy, and Coach Wade, he went on to coach at Maryland for a little bit and was, successful coach, came back then to the community and was an athletic director till just a few years ago when he retired. So, I mean, he's got an unbelievable legacy in Baltimore. And he was an athlete before, he went to play pro football. So he understood too, and just the dedication that man had to his city and that school district is incredible.
Well, I think that the rally around thing was big for them, but I mean, that's a lot of what Indiana basketball is, though, right? Like, whenever in my little community that we were in, right, like, we hadn't won a sectional in like 20 years. So when we did it, like, I mean, they had the fire trucks. I mean, everybody in the whole town was at the gym when we got back. Yeah. I mean, it packed. I mean, then when we won regional, everybody was there, like, it was just like, it was unbelievable. Like, they thought they had won the World Series because you had old guys that were like, I remember back 20 years ago when we did, like, I never thought we were ever going to be able to do anything. And, it went from the beginning of the season to where we weren't that good. I mean, we were on the border to where we went on like a 10-game winning streak, and then we won these things. So we went from everybody talking smack about us to everybody loving us.
Yeah.
But even though they were talking smack, the gym was still full when we were losing, just as much as when we were winning, because it's like they have this thing about the pride on the chest, right?
Yeah.
So like that's just Indiana basketball in certain communities, because that's all they have, right? I mean, like, if you live, like where we went to school in Du Bois, what's really there? You're a farmer.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you go to games every Friday because there's nothing really to do, right? So that's what you live for, right? Your kids. And then when your kids graduate, you just go watch somebody else's kids.
Well, there's just an excitement too in the community there's an access to high school players that you don't have for even college players, right? Like, I didn't know any guys that I went to IU, and I maybe saw them walking through campus, but it's just not the same as walking through the hallways of a high school. Like, all those guys, even if you're not on the team, especially at a small school, even at a big school, like, everybody sort of knows who's on the team. And there's just a connection. You feel more of a connection to them, a camaraderie, and they're more like you, right? Although maybe not these guys.
Well, no, these guys are a different level.
But I'm sure they knew some of that. Some.
I'm saying on a smaller scale.
Muggsy's that's what's so special about him, right? Something so accessible about him. I mean, he's the smallest guy in the history of the NBA, so he looks like a normal guy, and then when he gets out on their court, he's like a magician, right? It's just he does both things, kind of like what Steph Curry does in a way. Now, I mean,
he made it possible for like Spud Webb and like Nate Robertson. Would he have ever thought he could have played in the NBA if it wasn't for...
Maybe not.
You know what I mean? Like, he made it possible for these other guys to believe they could do it, right?
Yeah, it could be.
So... But I thought it was interesting in the documentary when they talked about when they won their national championship at Georgetown. They came back and were like, well, if we had our Dunbar jackets on, everybody would have known us. But we didn't. And we just got back from winning the national
Georgetown
title.
Gear on.
And, and that's the thing about...
Now, I will say that Georgetown gear, if you go to 19.9, looks pretty sweet. So you can wear that. People would definitely know what it is now.
Oh, they definitely, they definitely would know.
They might know more now than they would back then.
I mean, it's a good story, definitely. I mean,
so Ali said that the documentary, when we're talking about him, is that you should read the book first and then watch the documentary, because really the book, what he intended to do was focus on one season, the one season and then the documentary expands it to the next year as well, where they kind of go for the national championship and then even beyond into the NBA. So I was curious what you thought just about how it dealt with the guys' lives after they left, because they focus on those 4 guys who made it to the NBA. And I was just curious if you liked that.
I wish,
or if you would have been like, hey, just stop at the high school.
No,
stuff.
I really liked it. I wish they would have just brought the other 2 guys what was it? Yeah, they brought 4. I wish they would have brought the other 2 guys, even though they didn't have successful NBA careers. But at least showed the journey of them going to college and mentioned them, a little bit more. Because to me, it was about the complete team, right? That was the one thing that I wish they would have added more. They were part of making that team that great, but they only focused on the 4 guys.
Right.
So I wish they would have focused. I understand why they did it.
Yeah.
But I wish they would have just had a little segment, showing each of them picking their college or, showing them going to their college and then saying, the guy played 4 years. And they could have just ended at that, right? But at least gave a little bit because they were just as important, right? For that team.
For sure. It's choices too. I just think that, watching the documentary out of order, I watched that first and then read the book, you don't even really realize how good the center for, Reggie Lewis, who ends up being the best in the NBA of the bunch or arguably the best. He didn't even start for that team.
That's what I mean. There was 2 other guys they don't even really talk about.
And he's legit. He's throwing down crazy dunks, and you can imagine. And again, in high school, to have a guy that could dunk, in game,
it was a big deal.
In game with regularity is pretty amazing. And to have a whole team full and to have a center that could just throw down monster 2-handed, okay. This guy is unbelievable, to wherever he ends up, it's an unbelievable all-time great high school player, which is awesome, again, because you've got that connection to him. And he just changed the way that they played the game. They talk a lot about why he started over Reggie Lewis, and it's just he added a different dynamic. He could come in there, set this kind of tone, this really aggressive tone, and then Lewis could come in there and do his kind of finesse stuff and really change up the way that they played. What a luxury to have, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean – I wish we could have had a half of Reggie Lewis on our team, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it would have been amazing, and it is crazy when you think about that he didn't even start for them, but they had it. I mean, that's why we're talking about him, right?
Yeah, did you like how it was tough for me to watch. I actually was almost tearing up just watching Muggsy talk about Reggie at what happened to Reggie. Of course, Reggie passes away from a heart condition, and and the documentary there. I guess they bring the guys back together, but it was tough. They spent a lot of time, on that. I know it is an interesting story because it's NBA, and they hint at some of the reasons, and we don't need to get into that.
Yeah,
we can leave it where it's at. But it is tough. It was tough to watch. These guys, you could see years, 20 years on, how emotional those guys still were.
Well, they were all close.
Yeah.
So, I thought maybe, what I was saying earlier, I wish that they would have talked about the other guys a little bit more. And I wish they would have almost not talked about Reggie as much.
Yeah.
Talk about him, obviously.
Yeah,
it's a big deal. But maybe, they're basing, I know that Reggie was going to be good, right? But they're basing it off of how many years was he playing? Was it 3?
I can't remember. He had been in the NBA for a while.
We're not for sure that he was going to be a legend.
Yeah.
Right?
He's legendary status because he's captain of the Celtics after Larry Bird.
Yeah.
So,
he was good, but
to have the title of captain on the Boston Celtics,
Wingate was good too, and so was Muggsy,
sure.
and so was Reggie Williams. So, they act like he was the best one, but we really, truly don't know.
Sure, yeah. If his career had ended for other reasons, he might not.
I hate to say that because I'm not saying he wasn't that good or anything of that nature. I'm just saying because of the unfortunate event, and they go into that, and the truth is now that guy never plays.
Yeah,
he gets his pacemaker.
Right.
Or
Chris Bosh situation. They either do the pacemaker and they
put
figure out
stuff on
okay,
him, and
or he's Chris Bosh and you just have to retire. And I don't know.
Back then I think that it was
it was a weird.
It's a different world.
It was a weird. They present a lot of information about it, and I didn't dig in further after it to see if what they presented is as true a telling as they could. They certainly paint the doctor who decided to, kind of go against the team of doctors' recommendation and to tell him like, hey, you can play.
But was the team really fighting?
I don't know. You know what I mean? Like that's
You know what I mean?
that's
I
the tough
doubt
thing. I didn't even touch it because it was such a tough thing to swallow. To even bring it up, it just, I don't know. I get as a documentarian, you want to try to tell that story because it is such a big part of the completion. It's kind of a bookend to this, right? It sort of ends at least part of the story of these guys, but it was just tough to have that at the end. There's so much joy and togetherness.
Yeah, I just don't know if, it has to be told.
Yeah.
But like I said, maybe, like it could have been talked about his college, talked about his thing, and then maybe had a thing, in memory of,
right.
Maybe not go into the whole doctor thing, and then the guy, possibly,
I know.
Like all these things. Like I don't think you need to go into that much detail about that when
Right.
you're really, he's part of the team,
Right.
But it's about the team, right?
It's a different way of telling documentaries. So there's a thing that's happening now, I feel like, with like players' documentaries where, especially now, the players are in control of their own stories. So,
Yeah, I don't like it.
So I know, but then you get it's more for entertainment.
Yeah, it's not really a documentary. It's almost like
a
movie, kind of like the Jordan one.
Right, exactly.
Like Jordan painted himself the way
Sure.
he wanted to be painted, right?
But
like he isn't gonna.
But it's self-serving. But then you don't have stuff like this. Maybe you
He makes Pippen look bad.
You walk out of it though, just kind of. I mean, it didn't come off to me that Pippen was bad because I was so focused on Jordan.
We're talking about him not wanting to go in the game.
I know, but
why even talk about that?
I don't know, but I didn't really think about. You know what I mean?
Well, I didn't think about it either until they said it, and then I was like, I can see why he was upset about it. Like, you're painting this picture. And why are you even talking about this? Is about, Jordan.
Yeah.
Why you got to bring in, one of the greatest sidekicks,
I guess.
in his own right. He was he's a top 50 player of all time. So, we don't need to get into that.
No, I know.
We're getting too sidetracked.
But we will sometime, maybe.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the book. So one of the guys that's brought up, and I'm going to give you a little homework because we're going to talk about this guy at a later time, John McClendon. And do they hint at him in the documentary? I can't remember.
I don't.
So he is this legendary coach, and there's like a weird connection between him and Wade. If they spiral it back in there, how he's connected to this guy, and he basically invents the fast break, so just the style of play, and it gets ascribed to different people. And I even think, we just did Arkansas, and it was interesting. We watched the 40 Minutes of Hell documentary, and it's interesting that Rick Pitino gets a lot of credit for that style of play, that full court pressing the whole game, shooting threes. Well, that's exactly what Nolan Richardson was doing, so it's interesting. McClendon like really invented this style of play, like this chaotic run, every time you get it, fast break. So I think it'd be worth diving into. And then there was two other books in there that we have to at some point talk about. One is Loose Balls, Terry Pluto book about the ABA, and they talk a lot about what happened to some of these guys. Again, the drugs that were not just on the streets, but ended up in college basketball or pro basketball, and just the role that played in there. And then the last one is Caught in the Net. He references that, and that is more about recruiting and the way that starts to change at this time too, because it becomes really.
Well, it talks a little bit about the recruiting and how dirty the recruiters were, and how, and I could only imagine back then.
I know.
What happens now
For sure.
But back then it was about like there wasn't social media, so if somebody did somebody wrong, like it was a word of mouth. Well, that was it.
What stinks is that that's what ends up happening to Wade, and you heard in the John Thompson book, he talks about like some situations where there's just like this weird moment where you're like, I'm just helping a human being out or a kid out, and I can't do that, right? Or the kid, is hungry, and a guy wants to take wants to take him out to eat, right?
Yeah,
he's like,
ridiculous.
You can't. No, you can't. So Thompson, two guys like took his players out to eat, and he found out about it, and so he made them pay the guy back. Like it was, and he wasn't like, it wasn't out of a I want influence with these guys. It was just, hey, I appreciate them, and I just wanted to buy him a meal, And it
Yeah.
just is so strange.
Well,
so
but
Wade's
it's
doing the
such a
same thing.
touchy situation.
He gets a bus ticket, I think, for one of his
Oh,
guys,
yeah.
and that's what ends up. He gets in trouble at Maryland for it. It's tough to hear
But
see
the
coaches
problem
trying
is
to do the right thing.
There's coaches that are trying to do the right thing.
I understand.
And then there's coaches that are trying to buy the players.
But isn't that your job as a governing body to figure out which is which, right? Because it seems like
we're going to a whole.
I know,
new
and
ballpark
we're not
with
going to
the
dive
NCAA.
deep into it, but I do think like it is important to bring up because that it plays a big role in Coach Wade in the way that he ends gets treated
definitely.
at,
And I mean,
at Maryland.
Do you think that he was any harder on his players than Bobby Knight was in Indiana?
No,
The only difference is he's at Maryland, right?
Right.
So.
Well, that's not the only difference, and he's black. I mean, that's a difference.
Well,
too.
that's another thing that we can't get
we
into
won't,
either.
But I think it's worth bringing up because it is a difference, And like I
definitely.
said, the same thing with like Nolan. Who's getting credit, especially when he's coaching. Right, this isn't 2021. This is 1980 something.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So it's a lot different world. I'd like to think that we're farther along, but I'm sure we still got work to do.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to switch to just talk a little bit about. There's two other things that were absolutely hilarious that Ali brought up too, and that people reading the book would enjoy so much. And I'll pivot to you. And I'm curious, just if you got any stories or just recollections from times when you were with the guys, because in the book he got to interview these guys, and a lot of the humor comes out. These guys go up to this tournament in New York City, and they end up staying in this YMCA, and get into shenanigans where they're in like Times Square in the early '80s, and they're high school kids, and they're just like seeing all kinds of crazy stuff at this YMCA. And I think Wingate, if I'm remembering right, ends up like breaking a TV, and then they don't tell the coach, but then the coach finds out.
Oh man!
And you can just imagine, like as a high school kid, doing something like that, and like worrying about the coach finding out, and what's gonna happen. And it just is, it's hilarious just to hear their recollections about their time in high school. So much of what is great about a team at that level is that you're together all the time.
Oh
right?
yeah,
You live your lives together.
Even like the players that I played with in high school, like if I see them out, I might not see them we just had our 20-year reunion, right?
Yeah.
And I sat there and I talked to them all night long, and I haven't seen some of them in 15 years. But we acted like we were just right back in the, like it was like we never missed a beat, right? Like we're joking and laughing, and I'm calling one, he has like a flannel shirt, I'm calling him a lumberjack. I'm like, is that what you're going for today? You want the crowd to... And I got him just rolling out there. But, like I remember this experience that I had that we didn't obviously travel as much as these guys did, but we had a pretty cool thing where we went to Rensselaer, Indiana as a team. And we played up there in a basketball camp. And they had NBA Jam, right? Like an arcade thing. We loved it, And, we're from a small town, so, we cuss and everything. But we're not supposed to,
These guys are cussing to you.
So we're playing, and I don't realize that the coach is behind me, right? So I'm playing against somebody, and I'm just cussing, talking all kinds of trash. I mean, I'm calling him the, words that I shouldn't call him. I'm just having a good time. We're in a lobby, right? There wasn't like it was just a bunch of high school kids, And my coach is like, Robert. I'm like, what? I'm like. Nobody gives me a head up. Like, I'm over here. Who knows what I said?
You got hit in the face with the basketball.
He's like, yeah, we're going to have to do some valleys for you. I don't know what's going on over here, but yeah.
Do we got a number on that? How many do you have to do?
I think it might have been like 5 or something. It wasn't. I mean, he was like, it was like he knew he had to do something to prove a point, but he was laughing because, I think I had in the game, I think it was Larry Johnson and Alonzo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it was Muggsy. Actually, I think he was on the game too.
I think, yeah.
He might have been it. I don't remember. But yeah, that was one of my moments that I thought I'll always remember that. And actually, We played basketball at Billy Harris. It's his brother that I was playing.
Okay.
Because we always played together and we always went to basketball camps together. So, yeah, that was what I remember.
That camaraderie just comes out in the book so much, where they're just an endless number of stories. I think Wingate they're in Times Square, and he tries to go into an adult establishment, let's call it that.
Oh, really?
And so he pays, and then the bouncer's like, "You're too young. You can't come in here." And he tries to get his money back. Not gonna happen.
Well, you think about it, like these guys probably looked like they were older, though, right?
Well, sure,
I mean, when you're 6'7", I mean,
not old enough though to get in.
No.
The bouncer knows. So let's end on bringing it back to Muggsy, because there was something in there that I loved, and I think is important to talk about him. They talk about how his leadership was so important, and that he could dominate a basketball game with leadership. And I think that is an absolutely fascinating take on the game of basketball, because I think Chris Paul does a little bit of that now, and I think that it's maybe underappreciated. The fact that basketball is not all about talent, that there's this mental part of the game, and that you could dominate a game with your mentality. And I think that just it speaks so much to Muggsy and his greatness.
Well, it's because Muggsy led by example, right? He was like the guy that was full court press, right? Gave everything he had. He would be the guy that would go up and he would make the pass because he didn't care if he scored, right? It's like you said, but in today's basketball, it almost can't exist, right? Because if you can't shoot,
well, how do you develop that? So how do you develop today's version of it? The leadership mentality that could dominate a game. Is it possible to develop that? I mean, developed his. I think
Curry's got it. I mean, because if you think about it, I don't think Curry cares if he scores or somebody else scores. He'll take it in there and he'll pass it if he doesn't have the shot. I think that's what makes him so good, is because he will pass the ball. Even though he could get a shot up every single time, there's no question about that. Nobody's going to stop him.
He could average 50 if he wanted
to,
but he knows.
I think that's what made the Warriors so tough when Klay Thompson was there, right? Klay Thompson's a perfect example of being a leader without the ball, right? He's plays defense hard. He shoots when he has good shots. He doesn't take bad shots, and he's happy with that as long as they win. So that's a way that somebody can be a leader. I don't think Curry cares if he scores 30 or he scores 10 if they win.
Right.
That's all he cares about. It's kind of like Draymond Green. He's the guy.
He might be taking that to an extreme at this point.
Yeah, he needs to shoot more. But I'm saying there is guys that are like that.
Yeah.
But it is far between what it used to be, because it used to be a point guard was the guy that got the rest of the team going. Even at my old age, I still like to tell people keep shooting, right? Even though I think in my head I don't want them to keep shooting. But
you're trying to manipulate the game mentally. You're
trying
to build that.
If I tell them they can do it, that person's going to play harder on defense. Right. That person's going to, even if he does shoot, he's going to shoot more confident than he was going to shoot before. So he has a greater chance of hitting it, and he's going to have more fun. Yeah. And, at our age, we want to win. There's no question. We want to win, but we're just going to have a fun time too, though, right?
No doubt about it.
I mean, sometimes it ain't as fun like the other night. It wasn't as fun, and I was trying everything to build up everybody, but it didn't really work out too well for me.
Doesn't always work out.
I was still fine leaving, and I felt like, well, I did what I could. I had fun.
Yeah, if you have Muggsy or Steph's talent, it helps. That helps too, right?
Well, I mean, I know. I'm just giving an example, though. I think that a lot of kids just. When they come out, and I'm trying to embed that into my son too, that
to underestimate that side of the game,
it's just as important to set somebody up for a layup or set somebody and hit them in their pocket when to shoot as you hitting it. I tell him all the time, I'm like, what do you like when I pass you the ball? Do you want me to throw it over your head and you have to catch it, or you want me to get it in your hands?
Right.
He's like, well, in my hands. I'm like, yeah. So when you're making passes, you should feel the same way. Yeah. I'm like, it doesn't matter if you can do a step back three and you got somebody sitting underneath the basket wide open. You make the wide open pass and you live on for the next shot when it's necessary for you to shoot that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a lot of people talk like that to kids anymore. They're just like, hey, you should work on your crossover step back or you're not going to get a play.
Well, we can. Like, that's the thing. You'll have a chance, I'm sure, to coach some. And
I will. And
yeah. And
I mean, that's
people listening too. Like that is an important idea to get out there. And I think that Muggsy specifically, they called him the greatest thing since Planters because he's a peanut. So there are so many other great stories about him, though. You've got the 5-star basketball camp story that we talk about in the Slam magazine thing, where Wade wants to draft him over all these other top point guards, and people think,
he's nuts. They wouldn't believe.
There's so many great stories about this team out there. We hit on it just a little, but I'm sure we'll be able to circle back to them again in the future. So, you got anything else before we get out of here?
No, I just want to say again that this was. I'm so happy that we could go into depth with this because it was an amazing story, and people should definitely watch the documentary and read the book.
Love it. Well, thanks for being here tonight. Thank you for listening to the 19-9 podcast. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, make sure you do. And while you're at it, leave us a rating or review. It helps keep us going. We also have links to all of 19-9's social media so you never miss a release. Until next time.